What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another Imais NG Naruto story. What if Naruto was replaced by his sister but she regretted everything too late? If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. High above the streets, masked figures watched the buzz of the village below. He's the Jinchuriki? A female voice asked in surprise. The blonde kid? Affirmative. Uzumaki Naruto cautioned to keep our distance. From behind a wolf-painted mask the woman watched the grinning kid bounding down the streets with wide eyes. Why, he's kinda cute. Does he have any friends? Grim laughter rippled across the huddled group. The brat's too obnoxious for that. But has he got any living family? Her voice continued curiously. Any brothers or sisters? Nah, the dog-masked member shook his head with authoritative will. Don't press on the subject, Wolf. The boy's dangerous. She stood there on the street, watching silently. She watched the young blonde-haired boy, a grin so wide on his face she wonders if it hurts to smile that broadly, bounding down the street, his laughter ringing off the shop walls. She didn't really know why she'd bothered to take a look, but the talk of all the shinobi in the mess rooms were unanimous on only one subject. Uzumaki Naruto, Jinchuriki to the Kyuubi no Kitsune. The story was always the same. The boy had no focus. He would try the patience of Buddha himself. She'd heard things from the academy instructors about his horrible lack of any ninja skill and his raucous behavior. Perhaps since the story rather reminded her of a girl a long time ago, Anbu Wolf decided that Naruto should still be given the benefit of the doubt to prove himself. And on the streets of Konoha, she realized he was far from the dangerous monster she heard of in the office. The kid sported a bright, eye-catching orange jumpsuit that caught the disapproving attention of civilians and ninja alike. As he went by in his get-up, the foxy grin never left his face. One look at the Hokage monument said it all. The four village heroes now sported lipstick and swirly patterns on their otherwise dignified faces. A smile played on the ninja's lips from behind the ceramic mask. Then, the scene suddenly went wrong before her eyes. There was something off in everyone's expressions. Though no words were said, it seemed the whole village automatically changed their mood when he appeared. Irritated sighs at his last successful prank and transitions from a bright smile at the last customer to an icy glare at the kid. The Kyuubi container was the village pariah. She wondered whether the kid noticed it, and if it hurt him to experience that. He never seemed to stop laughing, as if joy was perpetually plastered on his face. Despite the boy's obnoxiousness, she was struck by the fierce determination and the will of fire she could see in the boy's blue eyes. It both intrigued and fascinated her. Anbu Wolf gave one last wistful glance at the blonde child before disappearing just as silently as she'd arrived. Duty called. The whiskered kid bounded between each stall, captivated by the melange of colors, scents and sounds. He halted abruptly outside a stand, baby blue eyes widening in delight at the colorful array of masks behind the vendor. Porcelain animal masks akin to those worn by the infamous Anbu members, fearsome-looking Gigaku masks and even ones crafted in the faces of past Hokages. So many choices. Awa! He exclaimed, peering at each unique item. The burly store owner must have had a bad day or something, because he strode over to the boy standing outside his stall menacingly. What he found unpleasant in the boy's excitement thoroughly mystified Naruto, but nothing prepared him for the rough shove that followed. He coughed in confusion as the world tilted and he sat looking up at the stall owner. I was just looking, he protested. What's your problem? Get out, you cursed thing. The man answered in a voice low with suppressed rage. Get out. The ceramic mask he had exclaimed over clattered on the dusty street beside Naruto. He felt sick to his stomach, his eyes swimming and his heart clenching from the icy glare that man had given him. That look, that expression he had grown to recognize on everyone's faces, still punctured him. Whispers began to circulate from the crowd that had gathered, and for the millionth time in his life, Naruto wondered just what on earth he had done to deserve this. Who would allow such a thing here? Someone get that bakemono away. Haven't we been exposed to enough evil? High in the treetops, Anbu Wolf surveyed the scene below grimly. Dangerous? The small vulnerable kid at the mercy of the villagers, dangerous? What kind of brainwashing did these civilians go through to think that? The kunoichi pondered. She watched in growing dismay as the villagers who had witnessed it averted their eyes, the way they tilted each other heads to whisper, the pointed fingers. As if the 6-year-old boy was some demon incarnate, a hideous plague made flesh, as if breathing his very air was lethal. A little bit of her died as the boy picked himself up with his skinny arms and walked away. For a moment, the kunoichi, her name was Haruna, no surname, seriously considered intervening, although to do so was a serious breach of conduct. Anbu were not meant to intervene or go near the civilians unless ordered to. She herself had neither business nor reason to be in the marketplace, or above it, since she was atop a tree. Her superiors would never forgive her. Her peers would hate her more than they already made obvious. From behind her wolf-painted mask, she watched the boy's retreating figure make its way as far as possible from the hateful crowd with regret. No one else was making a move to help him, and she was joining them too. It offended her sense of justice. Naruto was walking away slowly when the rush of air above him stopped him. The mask sailed over Naruto's head in a neat parabolic arc before landing almost gracefully on the stall owner's head. Though it was just a mask, the man stumbled back like he'd been hit with a boulder. Huh? He looked up as a brunette, silver-gray-clad woman brushed past him, walking straight towards the vendor. Naruto gulped, confused, before turning tail and bolting quickly. In his mind there was only the opportunity that strange girl had given him to run away. He needed to disappear before the attention came back for him. While he fled from the scene, the man at the stall was unrepentant, or, she observed dryly, did not think he was in the wrong. If this was the kind of people she risked her life protecting every day, she rather regretted not throwing the mask any harder. The kunoichi looked down at the mask on the ground and seemed to realize for the first time that she was out in the open and that she hadn't thought of what to do next. The Uzumaki had disappeared down the maze of the village streets, and as an Anbu she had forgotten what normal people did in a market situation. In the end, none of the passerbys could complain. The Anbu kunoichi paid for the mask the Jinchuriki had been thrown, and left a bruise with the notes as she wished the stallkeeper a good day. Anbu Wolf found the kid some 10 minutes later, sitting alone on a hill overlooking the village, looking profoundly miserable. The mask twisted nervously in her hands as she debated on how to give it to him, the Jinchuriki. She didn't exactly want to scare the kid or him to get the wrong idea about it. Besides, a masked ninja dropping in on a solitary kid? That was creepy, even for ninja standards. From where he sat, Naruto looked impossibly small. Something about the sight brought memories back. She pulled her wolf Anbu mask over her face before making her way to him. The boy looked vaguely panicked when spotted the Anbu member heading towards him and scrambled to his feet. Uzumaki Naruto? The blonde head nodded uncertainly. After a silent pause, the figure placed the mask in her hands on his face, much to his surprise, before it flickered and disappeared. Wolf, Captain says you're filling in for Nezumi. Tor is going to Kiri in an hour. Roger that. Where am I going? Gate patrol, cuz Genma's sick. Haruna pushed a kunai into the holster on her thigh. Okay, how's the Uzumaki today? She inquired conversationally. The other Anbu agent crouched at the desk beside her shrugged. Easy day for us. He's just been hanging around the square trying to find someone, but other than that, nothing to worry about. That's good. Oh, and I'm canceling that meet-up with Beaver, if that's alright. Not in the mood for eating out tonight. You mean you blew off your salary on chocolate? I know. Hurry up, they're waiting. Sure, have fun without me. She rolled her eyes as she exited the building. The dull ache in his stomach reminded Naruto that he needed food and fast. Upon inspection, it was revealed his scant fridge held nothing particularly appetizing, so he slipped out of the door in the search of something better. It was growing dark, but he didn't mind. In fact, it was better, seeing there were less people likely to be walking the streets at this time. He spotted the lights of a brightly lit ramen stand at the corner of the street, one he had frequented a few times before. Unlike a lot of the other stores, it was one of the places where he was served without a plastic smile or disdainful glare cast in his direction as he entered. He walked silently, his mind still reeling over the incident with the mask the day before. Over the years, an inward survival instinct had taught him to let whatever bad incidents he experienced go without a second thought, but this time, this love-starved boy was filled with a desire to at least say thank you. A simple thank you for the mask that now stayed beside his bed. He was still mulling the idea over a hot bowl of ramen when the cloth curtain lifted once more and another person joined him at the counter. It was a girl, wearing the Anbu uniform, her dark hair in a ponytail. A strange feeling stirred in his gut. Vaguely, somehow he thought he recognized her, almost certain he had glimpsed the same shock of dark hair before. "Oja-san, miso pork ramen please. All night would be great." Hi. The sound of the boiling noodles, frying pork and the cozy clatter of chopsticks filled the silence that fell over the table soon after. Naruto, hiding behind his own bowl of noodles, surveyed the ninja from behind the wisps of steam curling from the broth. Sensing his blue eyes on hers, she too turned and realized that the kid beside her was the Jinchuriki she had helped from the other day. Well, what a coincidence. Did the kid like ramen too? "Hello," she said first, taking the role as the older one here. "Hello." A pause. The kid was still staring at her. Haruna, trying to engender some sort of friendship with the scrawny child looking at her with ocean eyes, smiled awkwardly. "You like ramen?" Naruto nodded, unsure of whether or not to tell her that he practically lived off it and that it was one of his reasons for living. "Oh," she nodded exaggeratedly, all the time thinking, is he going to start running here or what? "Me too." Thankfully her order was ready just then, bowl sending off wafts of savory bliss, which she dug into gratefully. Shinobi could learn how to kill enemies without a sound, commit daring deeds on a daily basis, but the majority of them, especially those in the base kitchens, couldn't make anything as nicely as the civilians did. Particularly old man Tucci here. It had been rumored that even the Yondaime loved the ramen at Ichiaku. Naruto gulped his mouthful down, wondering why he was so curious about this newcomer that he'd spent more than 5 minutes on his one bowl. She must have just come from a mission, the small boy assumed. But since when did Anbu eat at Ichiaku? And also, did ANBU people have normal faces under their masks as well? He didn't know what to think anymore. Of the rare times he'd glimpsed one of the silver-clad masked ninja, they'd always been mere glimpses that melded into the shadows like smoke. It was the first time he'd seen an Anbu without her mask on, and eating ramen as well. Small in his seat, Naruto looked around. At the ceiling, the smoke wafting from the stove, the empty street, as he waited for his bowl. His eyes drifted silently, and caught sight of the mask on the chair beside his countertop companion. The mask that resembled a wolf. The chopsticks fell from his hands with a clatter. The ninja realized the situation a heartbeat after. Her thoughts immediately fluttered between ingrained instinct to dispose of anyone who knew her identity or to think of how to not alarm the child. "Ah," Naruto stuttered. His hands gestured wildly at the wolf swirls on the ceramic of the mask on the bench beside her. Are you, the other day?" "Yes I am, Uzumaki Naruto." She kicked herself inwardly because if anything, she sounded like she had been caught stealing or something. Calm conduct as her guide, she spoke slowly. The main priority was not to scare the kid and thus raise the alarm that she was in a civilian eatery that evening. "My name is Anbu Wolf and I stepped in because what that man did to you was wrong and he was not going to get away with that on my watch. So no need to thank me, okay?" she finished. "Naruto?" Naruto shook his head, looking, to her momentary fright, dazed. "Thank you. For the mask," he said anyway. For some reason he was looking at her with an expression that took a while to recognize as gratitude. "No one ever did that for me before." Haruna stared at him quietly. "No one?" She knew she didn't even have to ask. He shook his head. "That's why I really wanted to meet you. To say thanks, I mean." He chuckled brazenly, all the while clenching his hands into the folds of his shirt. Lost for words, Haruna racked her head for what to say in reply. She felt dangerously close to losing her train of thought, for somehow all the years of order and training had flown out of her mind and she found herself recalling them, remembering better times, before she joined the Anbu and when her little brother was at her side and asking her what she thought about his new idea too. "So it's nice to meet you," Naruto was saying, "but you know if I have to go then I'll go." The kunoichi blinked, finding herself back at Ichiraku and instead of him, the Uzumaki looking up at her. "No, not at all," she found herself saying. In fact, she continued as she pulled her chair closer to his with a smile. "I was looking forward to meeting you too, Uzumaki Naruto." It did not strike the boy as strange that this unknown Anbu agent was aware of his name. It seemed everyone was fully conscious of his existence and had often expressed their displeasure at it, through the not-so-subtle comments he happened to pick up on a regular basis. Besides, all any child really needed was attention, and now that someone was giving it without him getting in trouble first, Naruto lit up quickly. "Why don't you tell me more about yourself, okay?" And so for the first time, in the warmth and coziness of Ichiraku, The kunoichi learned more about the Jinchuriki to the Kyuubi than she could ever have hoped to know from the shinobi she worked with. By the fourth bowl of ramen it seemed a shame that she had never gotten to know the kid before, and she was almost disappointed that the time had flown so fast, for there were evening patrols to do. Naruto as well had lost the guarded expression he had worn for the majority of the day as well. "Hey kid," Haruna eyed the clock as she fished out a wad of notes and placed it on the tabletop. "I know a lot of people have been mean to you, so enjoy yourself, okay? There's enough there for another 6 or so bowls. Smile," she thought. "Be happy. Enjoy what you like since everyone else has done their best to treat you like dirt." Later. Wait. Naruto called out, swallowing a fishball as he said so. The brunette kunoichi paused obligingly, resting one hand against the frame of the stand. "Anbu lady, I didn't get your name." She took off her mask to show a grin at the childish title and told him with a smile, "My name is Haruna." "It's a pleasure to meet you, Naruto-kun." Then she turned on her heel and went on her way. The boy remained silent as he watched Haruna's figure disappear down the empty street, barely allowing himself to enjoy the strange, warm sensation seeping over him. Haruna, newly found acquaintance or not, it was an unusually nice gesture to someone like him. In the night, while Konoha dreamt, their Jinchuriki was drowning in his solitude. In the night, when there was no one around to witness him take off his defenses, he would curl himself into a ball with only his conscience for company. Even though he was never a part of it, Naruto much preferred the bustle of day than the silence of the night. In the bare, echoing apartment, the memories of the day as the village pariah would rush in as one distorted, hellish nightmare. The simple frosty glares, the way expressions transformed perceptibly whenever they caught sight of him into ones of disdain, hatred and dislike. Nighttime was malignant, an inescapable nightmare that he had yet to find the light at the end of. Tonight, the nightmare was the same, and Naruto sat on the blanket and hugged his knees to himself in some effort to keep the emotions tamped down inside him. He wouldn't let the troubles he was facing get him down, not while he was striving to prove with every fiber of his being that he was someone to the villagers. He felt close to breaking, and no amount of wishing for the nameless, faceless persons who were the parents he had been told every child was meant to have was enough to make a difference. Tilda. Wait, he lives on his own? All by himself? The kunoichi asked as she watched Naruto move himself up on his elbows only to curl into a ball sitting up on the bed from the inn-room that served as a patrol center for night watches. Konoha kept 24-hour surveillance patrols on the village, and this was the first time it had crossed the ANBU's minds to shift their gazes even momentarily on the rundown apartment that housed their Jinchuriki. Anbu Wolf took her eyes off the binoculars to round on the other 3 ninja joining her. "The kid's 6. And so were we when we became ninjas," Nezumi reminded her, before turning his eyes back to the Rubik's Cube in his hands. His obsession with games knew no bounds. "It's not our problem, he'll survive. What if he has nightmares?" she pressed on, because she remembered Naruto did not look the same way when she'd seen him at the ramen stand that other night. "Can we help? He's bound to have nightmares. It's not safe to leave kids on their own. If it was a problem, then we would, only it isn't. If the brat read something scary, it's his fault." Haruna should have felt fine with that, but she didn't. The idea of turning away and going back to her own empty apartment sank like a stone in her stomach. She prodded the ninja in the back, where she knew the armor was the weakest. "I know this goes without saying, but I'll say it again. You guys are mean. I'm just going to take a look. I'll be right back, sheesh." Her patrol partner barely shrugged, but when he stood and opened the window for her, signaling that he'd take over the shift for the both of them, Haruna grinned. The Anbu knew her well enough to know there wasn't any stopping her in the first place. As he went back to his game, and Haruna climbed out onto the roof, the mousy-haired ninja reminded her, "Just remember, we're not social justice warriors, Wolf, we're Anbu. If there's anything wrong, you're not supposed to make contact." "No need to tell me twice," she assured the uninterested group. "I'll be back in a second." Tilda. He was so tired. Somehow there was always the knowledge that a child like him shouldn't need to barricade himself against a world that did not want him. He'd had too much. He was so tired of this cheerful facade. He could feel the reel slipping from his hands. He was at his breaking point, and he didn't want to be so alone anymore. He could feel something ripping inside. He was going to break, and he didn't care so long as it stopped hurting. Naruto? Wide, hazel eyes were staring at him from the window. He couldn't move, couldn't speak, every muscle still seized in the ball he had curled himself into. He only watched, wide-eyed as the person at the window's shoulders slumped in relief. Anbu Wolf, Haruna, blinked in surprise. At first the only problem that had crossed her mind before coming to Naruto's apartment was what she would say in explanation if he did see her there. Now, being someone who knew what isolation, loneliness, and indescribable longing felt like, she realized its signs on Naruto at the sight of him on the bed. Haruna climbed in through the window and perched herself on the bed beside him, mentally noting all that she observed. The boy was clutching his knees so tightly the knuckles were white and he was shaking. "Naruto. It's me, Haruna. Do you remember me?" There was no reply. The boy's eyes were fixed on the sky past her shoulder. Perhaps he didn't remember her. Their conversation at Ichiaku had been 2 weeks ago, but she let out the breath she hadn't known she had been holding in when he nodded slowly. Naruto's eyes were pools of abject misery. Any illusion of control that his 6-year-old mind could conjure that lasted this long should have disappeared long ago. She pushed the reminder that she was supposed to keep her distance far from her mind. At this moment Naruto needed her complete honesty and undivided attention, and it wasn't likely that there would be another chance if she let this slip through her fingers. Anbu Wolf cursed under her breath. She had walked straight into a thick mess without so much as a second thought. Or any thought, for that matter. Besides, she noted, with much inward chagrin, she didn't really know what to do. For a moment she wished she had the skill of other Junin, the ones who were able to calm any crying child with a whisper and soft touch. But her hands had long since lost their gentility. Haruna forced an enthusiastic, all-knowing tone. She might as well begin. "Bad dreams, am I right? I know all about them. I used to have them all the time when I was your age. Scary stuff. Nightmares. You, want to let me know about yours?" Naruto wasn't answering. No doubt he was still shaken, and the unexpected warmth of having someone come to his side, worrying about him, would be far more than he could handle. He couldn't seem to find the words to ask the ninja why she was here. Haruna saw it all and went on talking, filling up the empty space around them with words of jumbled comfort, meaningless sentences to let him know the world still existed. "You don't really have to tell me. Just having someone there usually makes it feel better. Can you see the moon? It looks nice tonight, don't you think?" She stopped, feeling like a failure, because for all her unprofessional intrusion, Naruto was still shaking. The Anbu agent thought back to all the times she'd had to deal with traumatized minors and decided to take a simpler approach. "You know what, I'll ask questions and all you have to do is nod or shake your head. Can you do that for me, Naruto?" She sent a silent prayer of thanks when the boy peeked an eye out from underneath his arms and nodded. "Good," she said, "good. Are you hurting anywhere?" The boy shook his head, still not talking. "Okay, you're not hurt, that's good to know. Good." She blew her cheeks out as she thought for the next question. "Were you dreaming about scary things?" The boy shook his head, left, right, left again, to the kunoichi's confusion. "So, were you dreaming at all then?" To her surprise, Naruto did answer her verbally this time. He hadn't been sleeping at all. Haruna couldn't think of anything to say in response and just made a noise to show that she was listening. Naruto seemed to regain a bit of his courage as he pointed to his chest, or rather, curled his hands into them, a silent demonstration of the unexplainable ache where his heart was. Haruna was perceptive enough to understand the gesture. "You're feeling sad, aren't you, most nights? If you can describe it to me," she added, thinking quickly, "I think I can help you." Naruto paused, struggling to find the words to explain the tumult of emotions inside him. "I've never had anyone be nice to me. Everyone else is always with someone else and I don't. And it's hard not to cry, I just want to let it all out but I have to be strong." It seemed to be effectual, as Naruto's guard weakened instantly and he could not meet her eyes. With his left hand, he began to pick at the loose threads on his shorts, visibly struggling with whether to speak or not. His voice was hoarse as he said, "The whole world is mean and I just wish that I can forget all about them or just have someone else like everyone else does because that's all I can think about," and he seemed to lose the will to speak. He stole a look at the kunoichi sitting on his bed who had not said a word but seemed to be waiting for him to continue. Naruto took a shaky breath, trying to find the words to explain the tumult of feelings inside him, to finally just cave and spill his guts. He couldn't hold them back anymore. I want to stop holding everything in and just stop being strong because it's so hard to not cry when you want to because everyone wants to hurt you and in being alone hurts too but there's never anyone and he took a deep shuddering breath, too caught up in the rush of emotions to remember someone was actually listening to him. Why did it sound like sob every time he breathed? I don't know why it hurts so much but I wish that I didn't have to keep holding myself together and I really want to cry and I don't know what to do to make it all stop except fall asleep and The small boy lost the will to speak and turned away, wishing his throat stopped closing up whenever he tried to let something out. He couldn't bring himself to look at Haruna anymore. He felt like crawling into a hole and never coming back. Temporarily lost for words, the Anbu ninja did not attempt to reply. In fact, she had no idea what to do in response, much to her own regret. The emotive tirade had reminded her with grim irony of her own lonely childhood, the bleak aftermath of loss. And yet she knew she could feign empathy with the child because he had been alone from the start while she'd at least had a family, if only for a short time. Haruna sighed. Years working her way up the shinobi ranks had taught her to hide her emotions, but she knew all too well the sinking feeling of wanting someone beside you. A comforting hand around her shoulders to make her feel less alone, that the world wasn't so large and frightening. As she searched for an answer, her mind shifted to a memory from an eternity ago, when she was alone in her room, holding back tears, and her mother came in and hugged her to her chest. "Naruto?" she murmured, getting to her feet. Naruto turned toward her. "Wa?" The boy's question died on his lips. Without stopping to think, Haruna had opened her arms and pulled Naruto in. Naruto stared wide-eyed over the girl's shoulder, his mouth hanging open in shock. "It's okay to cry," Haruna said quietly, her chin resting on top of his blonde hair. "Sometimes, it's just a sign that you've been strong for too long." Naruto noticed his vision getting blurry and hot to which his eyelids fluttered in a surprised blink, and wetness rolled down his cheek to drip on the shirt he was being held against. In an attempt to stop the crumbling floodgates from breaking, the boy tried talking calming breaths but all that came out was a sob. And what really threw him was that at some point, he had brought his arms around the girl and was sobbing into her shirt. "It's not your fault, Naruto." She spoke into his hair as the storm of shaky sobs continued. Sisterly instinct, feelings that had not stirred inside her for a long time became the meaning to the words she said next. "I'm here, it's okay, you'll be okay," she kept on saying, although when she looked around at the gaping darkness of the room she felt like a liar. How could the boy be okay when he had no one, no other person who cared enough to wonder if he was actually surviving on his own? Haruna was just nodding off when she heard soft snoring from the bundle in her arms. The little Jinchuriki was fast asleep. "Don't make contact," her better judgment hissed. She carefully set his small frame down on the bed, trying to swallow the aching lump chafing her throat. After this, the Anbu decided, she would walk away and ask for a mission that would keep her away from Kunoa until the boy forgot all about ever having her save him. No wonder they were told in the Anbu not to interact with everyone else because now she wanted nothing more than to stay by the child's side and never leave. The posture of the moon in the sky reminded her that she'd been gone for a while and the rest of her peers would be wondering where she was. Wistfully, Haruna pressed a soft kiss to a warm forehead before standing to leave. She turned around and halted as a small hand grabbed her own. Anbu Wolf exhaled slowly, surprised that she recognized the pangs of pity in her chest. Curses, her workload had just doubled. No way was she going to let this go now. Naruto woke up to dancing sun motes and the premonition that something was not right. For starters, he was lying on his back, the blanket tucked at his chin. For a kid who always woke up either on the floor or in positions that defied the grade on his flexibility, this was alarming. Secondly, he'd slept more soundly than usual, thanks to Haruna's intervention the other night, and his battered alarm clock showed that school was starting in half an hour. Rubbing the sleep from his eyes, Naruto turned around the corner to his kitchen. And stopped in surprise. There was a box on the tabletop, with arrows pointing at a tag. That hadn't been there the night before. With, "Beware the kunai bombs," written in block letters next to an attempt at a spooky font with the words, "Pull this if you dare." Naruto wasn't stupid, whatever his abysmal report card said. His first reaction was to ignore the threats. The whole rig looked too amateurish for something of that scale. But she was Anbu. There was a possibility that the trap was made for that exact purpose, to lower his guard. What if she'd made it look completely obvious to trick him and had actually put one in? Pictures of exploding kunai bombs and shuriken devices danced across his vivid imagination. Were Anbu even allowed to do stuff like this? Then he realized just how weird and decidedly un-Hokage like to be scared of a box. The thought of what people would think if they knew that he, future ninja extraordinaire, had been scared of a box. It sounded bad every time he said it, was enough to overcome whatever caution he was meant to take. He reached a hesitant hand to the tag and pulled it. A letter with neat handwriting on it bordered with chibi doodles of what looked alarmingly akin to certain junin he'd seen around town popped out amidst showers of golden confetti. Kunai bombs? Oh heiau. I've got a mission on today, so I took off. But not before rigging this awesome thing out of the ramen box holder. I'm so creative. Heh. A chibi demon was inserted here. Anyway, there's lunch in the fridge and I packed your school bag, it's next to the door. Have a nice day. And don't forget to clean up the confetti. Haruna. Without warning, the box blew another party blower and another strip of paper landed beside the first. P.S. Congratulations. You have officially been introduced to Haruna, trickster extraordinaire and the most un-shinobi-like person you'd ever meet. Go now and tell the world that your great exploits young Uzumaki. And clear up the mess for me. Naruto stared at the letter for a full minute. The last of confetti sprinkled unceremoniously to wooden floor of his apartment. Just who was this Anbu lady, and how did she make that box? Halfway through his second cup of miso pork ramen he was no closer to finding an answer. He would wait until he next saw her. And the nonchalant ticking of the clock in his bedroom subtly reminded him that school was starting in 20 minutes. It was a beautiful day. That afternoon, they sat on the hill where Naruto had run off to the day of the mask incident. This time however the mood was bright, the array of various treats and other food they both decided was good for a picnic livening the atmosphere between the girl in Anbu gear and the boy in orange festively. Next to Naruto, Haruna was still laughing over the stunt they'd pulled in the candy store. While technically she executed it herself, Naruto was outside and minding the rest of the bags, and her pleasure at its success, as shown in the fact that she hadn't stopped giggling since she made her escape, would no doubt have earned the stink eye from her superiors if they saw her. The convenience store had been perfectly quiet before there was a boom, and pink smoke immediately clouded the shop window. That, coupled with Naruto's dramatic recount of the event, set off a serious bout of laughter that she had yet to recover from. Haruna did recover, eventually, and ruffled Naruto's sunny head for setting up the picnic on the blanket she had put out. For that was where they were right now, a picnic on a Friday afternoon. I wanted to, the Anbu no Ichi repeated, when Naruto hesitantly refused the sandwich she was holding out. The boy had laughed along with her and expressed his approval at the prank she'd played, but his enjoyment kept blinking out of his face, as if he was constantly reminding himself not to lower his guard. An assumption, she had the feeling, was not far off the mark. It's boring without any mission, so I wanted to have a picnic with you. Really, Naruto? Don't worry. Okay then. The boy finally agreed, finally allowing himself to follow the call of his stomach. For the past 3 days of surprises he had been treated to food and being picked up from school, all in the Anbu no Ichi's unexpected company, not to mention her visit the week before that had triggered the sequence of new events where she'd come to his aid in the middle of a torturous night. It was funny though, Naruto thought. If he wasn't so happy to receive the nice, or more accurately, the attention that did not involve any visible sign of the absolute loathing of his person that seemed to characterize every other person in the village, he would have avoided it. Yet while this display of kindness was strange to him, the Uzumaki felt there was no need to doubt the benevolent Anbu no Ichi. After all, she'd paid for a night at Ichiraku for him, a deed that was worth admiration. Not wanting to spoil the beauty of the moment by thinking, Naruto popped another chocolate in his mouth as he swung his feet under the bench. It was a lot of fun and he felt so much better than he usually did. He could get used to the life, he decided. It was a well-known fact that once you became friends with someone, breakfast at their place was somewhere down the track. Thankfully, Naruto had not minded the suggestion. There really wasn't any point in refusing when she had showed up at his apartment door with oatmeal and apples, and had opened the door wide to let her in. Across the cups of chicken ramen that Naruto had insisted on sharing, Haruna deigned to broach on the subject of Naruto's history. Other than him being the Kyuubi no Yoko's Jinchuriki, There was little else in the records she'd been able to find about the Uzumaki child. Haruna finished her cup first, because no one, not even anyone in the Anbu, could beat her when it came to eating speed, and went off to explore the rest of the apartment while Naruto finished his. For his own safety, the Jinchuriki had been assigned his own quarters, where no one was to disturb him. Yet from what she could see, "Nay, Naruto, is this where you honestly live?" Naruto looked up from his noodles and around the confines of the apartment he had called home since he left the orphanage a long time ago. It really wasn't very big, with the biggest room being the kitchen, living room and bedroom rolled into one, which opened into a narrow hallway with the bathroom on one side and the foyer on the other. There were no decorations anywhere, save for little plants crowded on the windowsill, paint peeled on the walls, and there was nothing vaguely resembling a plaything for the boy except a makeshift dummy that Haruna vaguely recognized as the dark-haired boy she'd seen with that Uchiha Itachi at the park. "Yeah," the blonde mumbled into his noodles half-heartedly. But it's fine. Really. I spend most of time outside with my awesome ninja training and you don't notice it much when you're eating ramen. It's a lot better than all the other places I stayed in. The Sandame was really nice to let me have this place for my own. Where'd you stay before? And, were the people nice to you? Faltered Naruto, embarrassment on his brow. They gave me food and let me help them around the house, so yeah, they weren't bad. And, there were always lots of other kids, so it was probably hard for them to take care of all of us at the same time. But staying here, his tone brightened and he ate his noodles with more of an appetite after, is my favorite. Naruto finished up with another sigh, of relief this time. Evidently he did not like talking about his experiences in a world that had not wanted him. Across the table, pity was suddenly stirring in Haruna's heart for the child. What a starved, unloved life he had had, a life of drudgery and poverty and neglect, for Anbu Wolf was astute enough to read between the lines of the Uzumaki Jinchuriki's history and divine the truth. Haruna looked around the room thoughtfully, the beginnings of a plan forming in her head that she would put into action later. "Thanks for telling me, Naruto." Focusing on the task at hand, she handed Naruto a much-needed napkin as she gathered her dishes. "Eat up, we'll leave as soon as you're ready." Later that day, after staying back at school to clean the classroom for his accidental destruction of the bookshelves with soaked toilet paper wads, Naruto walked up the stairs to his apartment, and groaned in frustration when his door wouldn't budge. He tried the rusted handle once again, only to get the same result. Wah, now this was a new experience. He was locked out of what was meant to be his own apartment. His own apartment, damn it. He banged the door with a small fist, not caring about the complaints he was sure to receive from it. "Nani?" The door opened a crack. A familiar head peeked out. "Oh, Naruto. School's finished already?" Haruna asked from a mouthful of cup ramen. "Stay out for a sec. I'm not done yet." He stopped because it was that unexpected, although the Anbu no Ichi looked as if it was a normal occurrence to come into his apartment. Hey, what? He raised his voice a decibel higher than it already was. "What are you doing in my house?" Haruna finished chewing and swallowed. "Ask no questions and you'll be told no lies, young one. All will be clear soon," was the mysterious reply as the door was shut once again. Naruto's found his voice enough to wail, "Is that my ramen?" as he heard the lock click once again. He was leaning sulkily against the railing of the stairs when the door finally opened again. Haruna caught the empty ramen cup from the dustbins below, thrown at her effortlessly, and threw it straight back at its giver. Unfazed, she announced with important air that the abode was prepared accordingly for the Lord Naru-chan, and ready for his viewing. Naruto, however, was less than amused. "Naru-chan, my %hash. I was waiting for ages." Language, Naruto, Haruna sighed, without much conviction. With a snort, Naruto pushed past the doorway and stomped inside the apartment. He stopped short at the entranceway. There was no trace of the mess he was accustomed to. The room was brightly lit, and the scent of lemon graced the air. The crumpled poster of the Konoha leaf insignia he'd acquired from his first days in the academy was hung up proudly on the wall, which, to his immense surprise, was rid of the cracks that had been present since he had first moved in. His bed was clean, the floor shone, and a basket full of folded laundry stood beside his chest of drawers. Rage forgotten in the face of the miracle that had taken place before his eyes, he stared around his made-over apartment. Behind him, Haruna was hopping up and down excitedly and pointed out that he had better go look at his kitchen, where he saw his table was set with a tablecloth, the sink free of dishes and the broken kitchen light was fixed and shining brightly. "So?" Haruna asked into his ear, causing him to jump back in surprise. "Do you like it? I know you like it." "Like it?" His jaw practically touched the floor. Wait, he began, but Haruna had taken his hand and was leading him through the rest of her handiwork. "Come on, this is your apartment, you know. I didn't throw anything away or look at any of your drawings, I promise," she continued as the boy followed mutely behind her. Naruto did not why. He should have been jumping up and down with happiness or hugging the Anbu agent for her kindness, but instead his heart was clenching inwardly and his mind was telling him not to accept the boon. As he surveyed his improved surroundings, his eyes resting on the gifts he had unexpectedly been the grateful recipient of, all of them from the same Anbu who had stopped at his silence and was waiting for his reply, the voice in his head reminded him to think. He wanted, so badly, to voice the appreciation he felt obliged to put forth, but not this time. There were questions he had to answer before he could let his mind rest. The whole experience had been too good for him to accept easily, too nice to make him believe there was no other part to it. Unconsciously, his bony fingers had curled into a fist. Whenever he broached the question earlier, the Anbu had only ever danced around his inquiries lightly, giving him vague replies that he now noticed neither answered his questions nor made him feel like he deserved this unfamiliar treatment. Not this time. Before he would allow himself to lower his guard, he had to know. Naruto's small head whipped around accusatorially, eyes raised to hazel ones as he demanded suddenly, "Why?" His voice was tight. "You have to tell me why first." He could have sworn he saw a flicker of confusion briefly pass over the otherwise composed Anbu agent. To her surprise, Naruto's face was set with a seriousness that did not fit right on a face as young as his. "Why what, Naruto? Why are you being nice to me? It's not normal," Naruto susurrated wretchedly, the look in his eyes akin to a stray dog on the streets. "'Cause if you're going to stop next week or forget about it all tomorrow, I don't want it." Haruna's hand dropped to her sides as she finally grasped the reason for the unanticipated reluctance on the Uzumaki's part. Of course, how could she have been so stupid, so horribly presumptuous? The kid had been promised redemption and duped of it too many times to count. No wonder he'd looked at her like she'd spoken another language when she'd offered him a custard pastry on his way to school. Naruto was looking away, his sensitive little face flushed. It didn't feel nice for him to say those things either, especially when Haruna had been so nice to him, but he couldn't let himself believe these other people so quickly. There were physical reminders, on his back, on his arms, his concave stomach, the imprints of what trusting people had done for him in the past. He wasn't going to let it happen again. So it was with a voice mustered with all the sincerity he had that he stood his ground and demanded, "Please just, tell me now, so that it won't hurt when you go away." "You think I'll go away, Naruto?" Quote. He lifted a thin hand and brushed a tinge of traitorous tears away tersely. "Won't you?" To his surprise, the Anbu ninja snorted. "Nope, I'm practically your big sister now. That is," she paused, before asking slowly, "if you won't mind, having me, for a sister." "A big sister?" Haruna nodded earnestly. She took Naruto's hand in her own and sat him down on the floor. The child had opened up to her out of his own accord before, and she intended to return the favor. "You know," she confessed, somewhat hesitantly since the words had been locked away for so long. "I used to have siblings of my own. Before I became a ninja. When they died, I didn't ever want to be a big sister again." Naruto had gone silent and was looking at her with new eyes. Haruna, eyes dry, told him softly, "You remind me of them, you know. And then I saw a really awesome, really cute kid called Uzumaki Naruto, and then I decided, I wanted to be a big sister again." A flicker of hope lingered in Naruto's eyes and he tremulously met Haruna's gaze. Slowly, Naruto seemed to unravel from the protective shield he'd put up around himself. The words had struck a chord and all pretense of bravery was gradually shattering in his desperate need to be held and protected and loved. But before he could make any choices, there was one more important question he had to ask. "What is a big sister, Haruna?" She told him as simply as she could. "So, being a big sister means you'll take care of all my stuff for me and I don't have to worry about it?" Haruna hesitated at the wording. "Well, to a point, I guess so." "And that you'll buy me food all the time?" I wouldn't say the pay's great in the Anbu, but you won't mind if I'm annoying? The kunoichi frowned in confusion. What was the kid up to? She was about to ask when Naruto fixed the most adorable puppy dog eyes on her and wheedled. And also that I can have someone to play pranks with? Please see. Haruna, renowned Anbu wolf in her circles, pinched the bridge of her nose before looking Naruto in the eye. Then she rolled her eyes. Yeah, why not? That actually sounds pretty great, yeah. The whiskered face processed that for a moment. Then, yosh. A grin bloomed across his face that mirrored Haruna's, and Naruto enveloped the kunoichi in bare tight hug, his arms encircling the gray armor and the strength and safety he could feel from it. He looked, and she did not think it was surprising, as if someone had eased the world off his shoulders. Haruna closed her eyes as she felt the surprising warmth behind them. It's a deal then, Uzumaki Naruto? She asked through the sunny tufts of hair. Naruto nodded as he sent a silent thank you from the bottom of his heart to whoever was listening. For the time being, nothing else seemed to matter because he had family to his name and he had no words to describe the feeling. It is scary sometimes, how far a person's hate can go. She's seen it all before. It isn't new. Because Naruto is kept a secret, the other countries do not know of his existence. This however also means that anyone who seeks to hurt him belongs from the Jinchuriki's own village itself. On night watches she prefers to keep her blades sheathed. Instead it is only a jab to the neck, side and kidney in rapid succession to have the perpetrator slump into her, out cold. And Konoha's Jinchuriki is safe again. Naruto doesn't need to see this side of her. He doesn't even need to know that there are people in his own village who want him dead in the first place. As she had expected, Haruna's actions hadn't gone without notice or opposition. Anbu Wolf, what is this I've been hearing of? Are you honestly interacting with the Jinchuriki without authorized consent? Another man, a captain of the Anbu, spoke. Your intervention with the mask stall owner hasn't gone unnoticed. This chain of events is alarming. I do believe you already know that your own comrades even do not agree with your recent proceedings. Anbu Wolf, who knelt before the seated elders with her wolf-painted mask lying on the ground beside her foot, broke the silence she had maintained since the council had adjourned. Oh, they do? The ninja asked blandly. I could hardly tell. The one-eyed man she recognized as Danzo-sama frowned. Your sarcasm isn't welcome here, Wolf. Were it not for worth within our village, I would have dispatched you on lengthy missions on a regular basis. The two hazel eyes darkened ever so slightly. I understand your motives to be for the boy's well-being, Haruna. In fact, I even support it. The Sandaime paused, aware of the sudden tension his comments had generated. But your actions alarm the others, the villagers, those who bear grudges against the Kyuubi. Hokage-sama, she said earnestly, hoping the man would care more about the welfare of the Yondaime's son than the rest of the stern-faced elders judging her, even if Uzumaki Naruto is the Jinchuriki that gives no reason to treat him any differently. The current state of affairs concerning the manner with which Uzumaki Naruto had been treated gave me no choice but to intervene. There was a brief silence as Haruna's words sunk in. Danzo spoke again, his voice cutting across the room. Then explain your decision to have him address you as his big sister. Yes. And how about you explain what happened to your right eye too, As nice as it'd be to say something witty, the young woman knew that these were dangerous waters that needed to be played safely. So it was with affected politeness that she replied. The Jinchuriki stated that he was lonely. In order to comfort him, I told him that I could be there should he find the need for company. Quote, the elder woman, her white hair pulled back tightly into a bun, held in place with a simple hairstick, frowned heavily in disapproval. You should not speak too carelessly, Anbu Wolf. Lady Homura said gravely. The neighboring countries do their best to keep their Jinchurikis in isolation. It would be prudent of you to do the same. The younger woman searched the aged face for a long moment before lowering respectfully. I agree, however, I see Uzumaki Naruto as a child, not a tailed beast's jailer, Homura-sama. The elder woman's glare was scorching. You would do well to remember why you were given that mask in the first place. We exist to protect Konoha, not relate with our Jinchurikis. And be that as it may, the Hokage voiced, his rank adding considerable gravity to his words, as one of the ANBU's youngest, this will reflect on how you and Uchiha Itachi are seen. Attachment to the Uzumaki, particularly by an Anbu kunoichi, may be perceived as an insult to those who lost members to the Kyuubi. At this moment, Haruna wished she had her mask on her face. It would have made the reply she was going to say less of an angry outburst and more of a calm justification instead. I believe the village then needs a shift of perspective. I understand that I have gone against orders, but I will not go against my better judgment. She took a deep breath and laid all her cards on the table. If we leave Naruto at the mercy of his isolation, in time Konoha will be fighting against a monster they have created. And as a member of the Anbu, her eyes flicked upwards and made contact with her commanding superior. I exist to protect Konoha. That is all. A thoughtful silence followed her words, and she almost hoped her message had come through when the mistrust and skepticism still apparent on her audience's faces forced it down again. The bandaged elder spoke again. This is exactly what we had hoped to prevent, why we left the boy to himself in the first place. You, Wolf, would never be able to understand. Let me make myself clear, as head of the Konoha Black Ops. If you continue to visit the boy or, kami forbid, grow even closer to him, I will be forced to assign you to more S-rank missions to keep you two apart. Haruna answered before she thought about it. You can put me on all missions you want, Danzo-sama. I do not mind the pay. She knew her tone was too arrogant to be interpreted as the anything but disrespectful, but would not retreat. Furthermore, I need only to complete them in less time and no difference would be made. Anbu Wolf, her commander, a muscled, war-chiseled man, had dropped his disappointed tone from the adjourning of the summons. Perhaps he was beginning to decide in her favor? Hi, Dancho? I expect to know the reason behind this sudden interest in the Jinchuriki. Why now? There was a pause as she thought it over. There were a lot of things to say if they were looking for an honest answer. Because I care about him. Because the rules aren't fair. Because I want to be a big sister again. I do not know, sir, was her reply at length. No one would understand what she really meant to say. I was not aware one needed a reason to treat a child like a child. In his seat, Hiruzen breathed a sigh of relief, satisfied with the wolf's reply. Just in time he composed himself, lest his actions be perceived as anything other than vague involvement. Very well. We will allow your interaction to continue. Everyone tensed at the announcement but held their peace. However, I warn you. You will take responsibility for any trouble that resumes from now on. And I have also decided that you will be kept under surveillance until we see fit. With that I close this meeting. Haruna lowered her head respectfully as the elders and superiors filed out of the room, the majority less than pleased. Damn, she'd let her emotions slip in front of her own superiors. Willing herself to stay composed, and ignoring the Anbu member now watching her from the ceiling, Haruna took out her wolf mask and slipped it on. But not before revealing the beginnings of a mischievous smile. It could have been worse, after all. Uchiha Itachi took the tea with a grateful smile and made his way to the corner nearest to the window. It was break time in the shinobi headquarters, and he was one of many tired, disheveled or recuperating Konoha enjoying the respite. He however, couldn't exactly enjoy the break. Sasuke had wanted to train with him that morning, and like always since he joined the Anbu, his missions clashed with his little brother's free time. Itachi missed spending the whole day outside with Sasuke. Especially now where his days were marked by how many enemies he defeated and whether missions were successful or not. As the raven-haired youth waited for his tea to cool, his ears zoned in on the snippet of conversation he could make out from the buzz of voices in the room. He was pretty sure he'd heard something about. Did you hear? Wolf was summoned a while ago. Even the Hokage was there. Dancho's been in a black mood since he came out. Do you know why? She was with the Jinchuriki without orders. Oh, damn, what on earth was she thinking? What was this? Itachi wondered as he took a sip of his now cooled tea. Unlike the rest of the shinobi in the ranks, Anbu Wolf was Haruna to Itachi, just as he was Itachi to her. Her animal title was what most people knew her by, but as teammates, they stuck to each other's first names instead. Haruna had been adamant about keeping her first name. Something about wanting to be a totally different person without her mask. In all honesty, Itachi didn't really mind. Names were names after all. So his teammate was in trouble, again. From what he could remember, she hadn't seemed any different on their missions the past few weeks. The recent rapid completion time of their missions came as no surprise since their team was always like that. Nor was the news of her befriending Konoha's young Jinchuriki. Haruna befriended anyone, it wasn't really anything new. Or maybe, he pondered, having zoned out of the conversation completely, He'd been so caught up with clan meetings and taking care of his little brother to notice anything new. "Hey Uchiha, what's the deal with your teammate?" Itachi considered his reply, aware of the multitude staring at him around the room. "I think she actually likes to be around the kid," Itachi said before he finished his tea and walked away. "Hey Naru-chan, yeah, Haruna? Remember that water balloon prank you did last week?" Naruto nods. "They didn't even catch me." "Good." A diabolical chuckle. "Nothing wrong with rebellion. Wanna do it again?" The completion of the new playground in the Konoha village park was well received among its inhabitants. It was the topic on every kid's lips that week. "Let's go over there this weekend. I want to try the swings. I heard the slides were really awesome." Even the teachers and the rest of the adults looked forward to its opening, speaking of the new playground with unmasked anticipation. So did a certain blonde loudmouth and his equally loud sister, except for different reasons. A new playground meant lots of people, and lots of people meant much whispering and detailed planning went on behind the closed curtains of Naruto's apartment. And so it happened that two masked, black-clad ninjas took the initiative and were now in the playground to be opened early the following morning. "Okay Naruto," Haruna whispered conspiratorially. "Let's get our plan clear. Are you sure you know what to do?" Hi Datbeo. Did you get the balloons, Nichan?" From behind her mask a la Kakashi, the dark-haired nodded her assertion. It was game time. The first of the villagers began to mill through the gates and a great chorus of oohs and ahs began. The priority was to take it slow and let the poor suckers, that is to say, citizens and fellow nin, create an atmosphere of safety, so the two joined the crowd. When everyone was in and the coast was clear, it was time to put the plan into action. Right on cue, Naruto made his way over to the sandpit, without suspicion, and was innocently digging around in the amazing new sandpit the workers had built, and had suddenly caught something from the corner of his eyes in the sand and was picking it up, in great awe and surprise. Hey everybody. The sandpits are awesome Datbeo. Look, I found candy in it. Just look at what I found in the sandpit Tte-beo. There's another one here too. He was bouncing excitedly and pointing to the sand he was standing on. A look of utter amazement spread across his face. Unable to resist the compelling enthusiasm of his cries, the rest of the children were up and dragging their parents towards the sandpit in an instant. Cries of, Where? And, I think I see, look, over there. I want some candy." Eclipsing all previous conversations, Haruna looked around, pleased. She'd been utterly forgotten, as planned. Now was the perfect opportunity to escape, while everyone was shoving to get into the sandpits and start digging, for little surprises added there just for that purpose, of course. Wolf to cub, fall back, regroup, and then proceed to step B. A rustle in the bushes opposite indicated that her companion was out of range just in time for the first irritated kids to give up looking for lollies and turn angrily towards where Naruto had been standing a few seconds ago. "There's nothing there, you freak. Hey, where'd he go? Wait, there are no lollies?" Amidst much muttering and disappointed faces, the parents of Konoha decided it was a good time for their children to explore the rest of the park. Just as the first of the parents made their way to the sandpit's edge, however, they were cordially treated to the second surprise that day. Yamanaka-san could have sworn he heard a chuckle before his golden-haired daughter disappeared in a barrage of water balloons. In the next 10 seconds, the citizens and children of Konoha were treated to a thorough dousing of colored water balloons fired with precise aim before they had time to think. A certain dark-haired and blonde duo was, on the other hand, breathless with laughter on the other side of the trees. Nay, did you see that Nichan? They totally fell for it, Datbeo. Did you see when I threw it at that kid there? The rest of the gloats on their success were lost in another chorus of raucous laughter while the rest of Konoha tried, unsuccessfully, to dry off their now soaking youngsters. A new voice brought the laughing duo back to the present. Real mature Haruna. A less than pleased Itachi said to his teammate as he did his best to dry his little brother's clothes without burning them with his Gugakyu. "I take my little brother to the park for one day, and this happens." He sighed. "Oh, Uchiha, what a coincidence. How did you enjoy my latest act of tomfoolery, especially with my new sidekick here?" Itachi rested his somber eyes on the whiskered blonde beside his teammate while Sasuke, dripping and sullen, leaned closer to his side defensively. "I suppose you'll explain later," he supposed. There were other matters of importance, and the explanation to the Jinchuriki's connection with Haruna could wait until they were in more fitting quarters. Sasuke had been his charge for today. My parents aren't going to be happy with this, you know. The kunoichi's features immediately washed over with concern. I know, I'm really sorry. Here, I've got a towel here. Helpfully, Haruna handed her teammate a towel. That should help. Thank you. Itachi took the towel handed to him gratefully. The relief on his face evaporated into something dangerous when he realized the towel had been liberally sprayed with contact dye. It was at this point that Haruna reminded herself of another strategic advantage to staying near the gates. She and her partner in crime automatically had a head start on the exit. But she lingered to enjoy the grand finale. Now Uchiha Itachi's sweet little brother's dark apparel was less than artistically streaked with vibrant pink. Haruna-san, sensing the impending danger, Naruto leaned in warningly to his elder sister, who was still laughing uncontrollably even though the joke had died quite some time ago, and tugged her sleeve. Haruna, we should probably leave right now. Yes, you should, Itachi agreed, with exasperation even his great self-control couldn't quite tamp down. Because I'm not the only one who'll be chasing you around for this, he said, gesturing to the loud crowd now beginning to make their way over to the laughing party. Of course. If anyone asks, we aren't at Ichiaku. As if as an afterthought, she stopped and looked over her shoulder. And Itachi, I'll leave you to explain this, thank you very much. Hey, wait. The two Uchiha brothers watched as the pranksters made their exit, Haruna twirling over the treetops and leaping over the nearest apartments, Naruto whizzing past the milling crowds until he joined her atop the library rooftop, with mixed emotions. Oi, Nissan, Sasuke finally said when the two were out of sight. You know Naruto's big sister? Yes, I do actually. She's my Anbu partner. Oh, the little boy thought for a minute before continuing gravely, I didn't think big sisters were like that. Itachi smiled as he took Sasuke's hand in his own and proceeded to make their way home. Neither. Come on, I'm going to need to clean you up, we don't want Okazen to worry. They were sitting in the locker room when Itachi brought up what he'd been thinking over amongst the many other responsibilities his mind had to keep track of. The mission today had been completed with minimal trouble. Neither of them was hurt in any way and could have the rest of the day off unless anyone else wanted a mission. Haruna would usually walk Itachi home to the Uchiha compound. She lived in the dorms, so there was no need for Itachi to do the same for her except that lately she had been busy, preoccupied. Or more correctly, needing to dash off on important business. I've been curious, the Uchiha commented as Haruna finished cleaning her katana. What is going on with you and the Uzumaki Jinchuriki? Trust me, Tachi, it's a long story. And I have all day. You might recall that you did dye my little brother's clothes pink at the park. Fine. The kunoichi rolled her eyes light-heartedly but concurred to telling her tale, taking out her kunai set so she could clean them while she spoke, since the Anbu life had instilled a need to constantly be productive. She began at the incident with the mask stall, her sense of justice leading her spur of the moment. Visiting him once during her night patrol and finding him in need of someone to listen. Her choice to befriend the Uzumaki wasn't merely out of pity. If she had to be honest, the fact that it had made other people angry spurred her on. She didn't regret it at all. And because it was Itachi and no one else, she told him about how being with Naruto had showed that her sisterly instinct hadn't disappeared even it had been so long since. Haruna cleared her throat. Itachi, understanding the abrupt pause, passed her his handkerchief. I'm fine. Really? You're sure? Yes. Please stop being so nice or I swear I'm going to bawl. Anyway, I'm done. That's it. That's where the story ends. Okay. There was a silence as Haruna packed her kunai set away and Itachi looked out the window. It had been a long time since they first met as children and they had come to a level of cohesion that neither of them really needed to say a word. For example, he had already recognized the subtle retribution given in the incident at the park. It was just so Haruna-like to do so. So the council meeting was the result of all this? Yup, I see. At least it wasn't the same as his lot. Those council meetings, with their simultaneously grave and solemn demeanors, were the only thing that made him regret ever joining the Anbu and becoming the pipeline between the clan and the village. Each day was heavier than the last. He could empathize with Haruna's defensiveness around Naruto. The way she wanted him to stay a kid and live life as a kid before life showed him how dark the world could be. It was the same as what he felt for Sasuke. So I guess we're the same now, right? I'm sorry? Haruna held out a hand to him to lift up her companion from where he sat. Both of us having little bros now. Well, it was always like that, but, she shrugged wistfully, there when we get home, I guess. Itachi nodded as he took the hand. Let's go. Our little brothers would be waiting for us right now. Do you think it will always be like this? Naruto asked. Haruna looked up from the noodle curls she was gluing to the face she'd drawn on the cardboard to where Naruto sat on his bed, looking dreamily out the window. It was a drowsy afternoon, the drone of the bees around the blooming flowers filling the fresh air with its cozy hum. Like what? Afternoon? No. Naruto waved his hands around, gesturing to anything and everything. This. He had no words to describe it, it was too personal, too precious. This. The afternoon. Being together. Haruna smiled and answered with a smile. Not always, but long enough. To Naruto especially, Haruna was away for a long time. At first her missions started out taking only a day or so, and she would either be at the school gates waiting for him at the end of the day or leaving him lunch in the mornings if she came back late. But as the weeks went by, try as she might, Haruna was put on call for solo missions perpetually, and her missions ended up spanning days, weeks, fortnights. Well, that was stupid of me, the ninja reflected as she bandaged another cut from a fluky shuriken. They weren't joking when they said they were putting me on call 24/7. To make up for it, however, Haruna always made sure she brought something back for her little brother. Candies from Suna, t-shirts from Anaho, the works. Naruto slowly began to accustom to the fact that while he'd wait ages for the next visit from Nichan, every mission meant a little souvenir, toy, some unheard of junk food from the far corners of the earth at the end of it for him. It wasn't the best, but they could cope. Naruto's sheer happiness every time Haruna clambered through the window to visit was well worth all the night treks she'd make to complete her missions in half the time. But presents or no, it was fairly obvious even to Naruto that Anbu Wolf's mission call rate was, well, intense. "Nay, Haru, nay, is your boss angry with you or something?" he asked some weeks later, after another exceptionally long mission had brought a very tired, but no less upbeat, Haruna back to his apartment. "Don't you ever get a weekend off nowadays?" The answer came in the form of a light snore. Haruna had dozed off at the table beside him. The little boy coughed politely. After all, he knew very well how hard it was to stay awake, thanks to the academy, but when Haruna didn't stir for another full 10 minutes, Naruto took matters of leaving sleep to nighttime into his own hands. Carefully, he selected a Pocky stick from the box open on the table and consequently prodded the kunoichi awake. His Anbu sister had her hand to the kunai at her leg in the space of a heartbeat. When she realized that she wasn't in a life-and-death situation and that Naruto was staring at her, her shoulders slumped in a mixture of relief and silent apology. "Nay, Chan?" said Nichan, smiled apologetically, real smooth Haruna, and stifled another yawn. "I'm sorry Naruto, what were you saying?" "Oh, nothing. I mean, do you get holidays in the Anbu?" "Holidays?" That word didn't exist in any of her superiors' dictionaries. "I do get days off," the kunoichi informed, then changed her tone as she continued, "but it's actually pretty busy lately, so it's pretty rare." "Sorry." On the chair opposite to her there was a smudge of melted chocolate on her little brother's cheek and she took out a handkerchief to wipe it. Because big sisters did so, pushing her urge to nap aside at least while she was around Naruto, Haruna asked what had often crossed her mind while she was away. Did he not have any friends? With a laugh that was too loud, the 6-year-old interlaced his fingers behind his sunny head and asked if that question included the pot plant on his windowsill in his bed. And if not, Harune looked genuinely concerned about the subject. Well, lots of the kids laughed around him and the stuff he did. He had long gotten the hint that the correct preposition was ed. But who on earth ever told anyone else that? That was close enough, wasn't it? Nope, not by a long shot. Wow, it wasn't that bad, was it? It's alright if you don't have hordes of friends. All you need is a few people you can trust, okay? She told him, giving him just the first of many important know-hows of life. The sooner he learned it the better. Try giving it another shot though. Well yeah Datbayo, I've got you and Tsuchijii-san and Ayame already. Haruna laughed, tiredly. Okay little man, but your next friend should really be someone around your age. Unable to fend sleep off any longer, the Anbu no Ichi closed her eyes and was asleep within seconds. Naruto trotted off to close the curtains. On his tippy toes, and while he waited for his ramen to cook, fetched a blanket from the bed and wrapped it carefully around his big sister's shoulders. There were set limits to the amount of attention a person could handle. When it seemed the 100th pair of eyes that morning zoned in on Anbu Wolf, she remembered just why she often opted to stay away from the other shinobi in the ranks. Especially now that news of her council summons recently had spread like wildfire. The common response to her recent action with the Jinchuriki was fairly obvious. "Wolf, what the F*** are you doing with the Uzumaki?" Note: shinobi rank and curse word frequency were directly proportionate to each other in the world of the ninja. Unless you were a person who just didn't like to swear, like her, or Uchiha Itachi, conversations of this type were natural occurrences. Haruna stopped her conversation with Itachi long enough to pop her bubblegum in reply to the muscled Anbu who'd asked. "Pop, good to see you too, Raiga." She answered unfazed since she'd learned from experience that it was the best way to get people off your case. Her colleague repeated his question, using the same expletive twice in the same sentence, and Wolf was sorely tempted to give a well-structured argument for the Uzumaki's sake when she stopped herself in time. If her commanding superiors hated what she was doing that badly, so would the rest of the shinobi underneath them. "Are you lonely or something? Anbu life got to you yet?" The brunette didn't have time for this and told the guys so. "Hey man, if it makes you feel any better, I'm the one keeping an eye on the kid and not you." "Happy?" "No." A near mocking chuckle. "It still looks weird, Wolf." "Really?" she retorted coolly. "Then it looks like we have something in common." If Itachi hadn't stood up at this point, trouble would have ensued and Haruna would have had the opportunity to exhibit the skills she had honed from the missions over the past few weeks. While Itachi was only 13, 14 in 2 months to be correct, and his teammate his senior by some 3 years, on levels of maturity it was the other way round. Uninclined to having others fight her battles for her, and the fact that Raiga had no reply to her comment, Haruna sighed and looked away. It wasn't as if she had expected anyone to agree with her in the first place. Raiga went off too and the activity more or less resumed as it had been in the room, weird looks included. The brunette reached into her pocket and took out another bubblegum packet, chewing the gum with extra vigor. Itachi sat down thoughtfully, incident already forgotten in his mind. He'd been pensive for the past 3 months and today, the first time seeing his teammate in that same amount of time, was no different. All those clan meetings, council meetings and more recently, the private ones he would have at the deepest hours of the night with the village elders. All of them centered around one thing, the clan. The clan, the clan, the clan. "So how are things with you and your little brother?" It took him a second to realize someone was talking to him. "Sasuke's doing very well, thank you. He will make the Uchiha proud someday." His eyes brightened remembering how Sasuke had been first in his class yesterday. Itachi always smiled with his eyes. "And you?" An offhand wave answered the inquiry. "And speaking of the Uchiha, hey Itachi, is there something going on with your clan?" Itachi straightened immediately as she continued, "Because the police office is almost always closed, and you know the stuff I do on night watches. When I'd rather report unruly civilian behavior to them." Itachi was the only Uchiha in the Anbu ranks. The rest of them typically formed the police force. Whenever there were civilians going against the rules, not that it was ever as bad as what ninja could do against other ninja. During Anbu Wolf's night watches, they were the ones she had to give reports to. Lately for some reason she was still in the dark about, it seemed the entire police force was preoccupied with other things. It was purely out of curiosity that Haruna mentioned it, however it was inwardly alarming for the raven-haired youth opposite her. "I apologize for your trouble," the Uchiha replied, telling himself to remain calm. "I'll ask about it at the meeting tonight." "You have another clan meeting?" "Whoa." Itachi shrugged his shoulders slightly. He didn't know how to explain the fact that those meetings had taken over his life for the past few months and that today was the first time he'd been able to go out of the compound without another of his clan accompanying him. The scarred Chunin whistled softly to himself as he walked up the steps to his classroom. As a teacher, the man rose with the sun from Monday to Friday, in order to be in class and preparing long before his students had even left their homes. Iruka, who had only just begun to teach on his own, he'd only been an assistant until last summer, and was only just assigned homeroom classes, was still the only one who came this early to prepare his classes. All his colleagues pegged him as an ultra-dedicated newbie, But really Iruka came to class this early because he liked the peace and quiet. The peace and quiet had waned ever so slightly lately, since it only took catching a glimpse of the desk at the far end of the room to start another round of meditation on his life, his past actions, and why he felt a twinge of pity for the Uzumaki sometimes. Iruka still remembered the night when he first found that he was to be Naruto's homeroom teacher. He'd been unable to sleep, staring at the wall instead. 6 years had not dulled the memories of blood, shattered glass, and burning skies. He still wondered why the Hokage had arranged things this way when he was really nothing but a novice teacher. Iruka wondered about a lot of things. Lately, his thoughts had centered a lot more on Naruto and the Anbu accompanying him, pushing other concerns like lunchtime duties and marking aside for the time being. Iruka hadn't seen Haruna for the past 7 years. They didn't know each other, on an acquaintance level only, as kids from the orphanage. If the brunette then had been trying to be inconspicuous, she failed miserably. It was during Iruka's time at school when the academy introduced lunchtime duty for their teachers, thanks to a few misunderstandings. But she disappeared soon after from the classes all of a sudden, and he hadn't given it much thought since then. And now here he was, a teacher, while that dark-haired girl was in the Anbu. And has Naruto under her wing too. No matter how many times he thought over it, it still didn't add up. Why did Haruna care? Did she have any idea how weird it looked? How was she taking care of him? Did Naruto's new guardian know about his schooling, or did she plan to supervise him out of school hours? And how had she been all these years anyway? He had so many questions to ask her. Iruka worried his bottom lip between his teeth and decided he'd get some answers. Today was as good as any. And well, he'd be lying if he said he didn't want to see her again. Sue, it wasn't a date? Haruna rolled her eyes from behind the blanket she was shaking out. Naruto had been sitting on the bed, arms folded and eyeing her suspiciously since she'd come in to tuck him in. If this was what she got for accepting Iruka's invitation for a chat that afternoon. Nope, for the last time Naruto, it was not a date. Sorry to burst your little fantastical bubble. We sat on a couch and just talked. Mostly about you. Really Naruto? But isn't that what you do on a Naruto? She glared, as if daring him to question her any further. We had hot chocolate. That doesn't make it a date. Huffing out of annoyance after all he had seen it with his own eyes. His elder sister and his young homeroom teacher beside her. Naruto flopped on his back and continued. So what did you do then? And my stomach still hurts, Haruna. I already told you. Talked about you and what you act like in school. And sheesh, that's because you had to ask if I was going to start dating your homeroom teacher right in front of him. Maybe she'd rammed him a bit too forcefully for that idea. And maybe Iruka's bright red face after Naruto's furious whispers made her laugh a little too loudly. She thought it best not to mention that their conversation had steered into childhood stories and random topics. At the mention of his school life, Naruto's questioning expression quickly switched to dismay. Homeroom wasn't even something you studied for, but Naruto had a feeling that homeroom teachers knew the most about their students than the subject teachers. After all, it was Iruka-sensei who gave out test scores or passed on messages in his case, threats of detention and cleaning tasks as punishment, on behalf of his other senseis. As if reading his mind, Haruna smiled and told him not to worry. Iruka had been polite and said some very nice things about him. Like the fact that he had a perfect attendance record. I think I smiled so widely I scared the people beside us. His elder sister confided to him, cheeks aglow with pride. But I'm proud of you, Naruto. It's hard to come to school sometimes, and that took serious guts. A fist bump followed this, and Naruto, suspicions pushed aside, shrugged embarrassedly. Nay, are you gonna be hanging out with him more often then? Who, Iruka? Naruto nodded, looking a trifle fearful of what her answer would be. Oh God, did he have to say hanging out? We'll, only if you give me reason to. She winked. You look sick, Haruna told her teammate when she bumped into him coincidentally on her way back from another mission. A solo one again since Itachi had still been unavailable. Is that why you've been away? The words hit him with a jolt. He certainly felt sick, but like always the boy hoped it did not show. He had to maintain his expressionless facade. No, he replied, reminding himself not to utter the forbidden words that so many things rested on. I have just been occupied lately. Ah, his teammate nodded. Clan stuff? Itachi left his answer as a non-committal one. He could no longer afford to let others in close enough to be able to piece together what had been hushed behind the stone walls of his home. If only you knew what the clan was planning. Their last mission as a team together had already passed. He was no longer just one of the Anbu but a double agent for the village and his clan. The Anbu? The place he thought he would have been able to get his own freedom, his own independence under the Hokage's orders alone. The place that had taught him the skills the clan wanted him to use on the village. If only they knew. If only he could tell them. If only someone would ask. Please excuse me, I have a clan meeting to attend. It sounded as if he actually wanted to go back to meetings and the elders and his father and listen like good boy to their plans. He hated himself for that. Confused behind her nonchalant expression, Haruna said nothing as she watched her teammate walk away. When he received his spelling test back with a big fat cross on it that day, Naruto made up his 6-year-old mind that a change was expedient. So, when the rest of the class swarmed out the doors and into the fresh air outside, the little blonde stayed at his desk, hoping that maybe if he stared at the writing long enough it might make sense for him. It wasn't that Naruto couldn't read. He was just, well, had a vague understanding of the act of recognizing and making sense of characters on a page, to put it simply. Being a kid who every kindergarten teacher had refused to be within a 10 meters radius of, the blonde's education had been minimal. He only hid his shaky reading ability fairly well underneath his loud and boisterous antics. In the farthest corner of the now empty classroom, a little girl in a cream-colored jacket sat. Hyuga Hinata could have only been a mouse, turtle or teeny tiny seahorse in her past life. Not because she wasn't widely known after all. One only needed to glimpse her on the street to surmise that she was of the prestigious Hyuga clan. But because if anyone asked, one only needed to give a long list of the synonyms of shy and eternally polite to describe her. This at the same time also meant she was the complete antithesis of the blonde class clown. Ah, but opposites did attract. He might only know her name, but the boy had been pulled in class repeatedly enough for everyone to know that he was utterly fearless. While everyone else sighed at his interruptions, or rejoiced, depending on what was being disturbed, Hinata couldn't help but be drawn to the way Naruto refused to back down. Even when the sensei was glaring at him with enough strength to burn a hole in the back wall. And besides, he sat in the seat next to her. Poring over books wasn't something Naruto could persevere at for more than 4 pages at the most. He gave up on a page with slightly more writing than usual, and when he looked back to stretch his neck after that strenuous mental exercise, the cream of Hinata's jacket caught his eye. Huh? Hinata? You're here? Hinata, who had since been sitting at her desk in silence, let out a cornered squeak. Horror of horrors, she would have to speak. Naruto stared for a long moment at the lavender-eyed girl before asking, not unkindly, "What are you doing here?" Blushing to the roots of her twilight blue hair, Hinata managed to whisper that she did not know. She usually ate lunch alone in the class, as far away from the rest of the other kids as possible. Naruto, on the other hand, was always the first to bolt out the doorway. Oh, okay. The whiskered boy turned back to his book for a second before turning around again and asking offhandedly, do you get this? This in itself was such an unexpected request that the Hyuga heiress forgot her chronic bashfulness for a second. What? Get what, Naruto-kun? Naruto pointed to the short paragraph on the page, the one with the strange kanji everyone else in the class seemed to be able to read with ease. Hinata ran her eyes over it quickly and wondered briefly if anyone could possibly not understand the simple piece. Being in a class comprised mostly of 6- and 7-year-olds, none of the textbooks contained any complex kanji. Why yes, she whispered uncertainly, wondering if it was the wrong answer to say. Do you want me to read it out for you? She offered, since the whole scenario reminded her of the evenings with Hanabi and helping her with her homework. If that's all right with you, Naruto. It was the only thing she could come up with, but even so Naruto looked at her like she'd discovered the secret to ramen. She didn't know that was the first time anyone had offered to do the same for him. You sure? 'Cause well yeah dat bayo. Sure. Strangely enough, Hinata did. At first, Naruto had to practically press his cheek against Hinata's just to hear her whisper, but her voice grew clearer as Naruto's blue eyes brightened with every word she said. When the bell rang like the undoing of a spell and the rest of the students came filing in for the last lesson before homeroom, both Naruto and Hinata quickly sidled back into their places without a word. School, it seemed, had brightened just a little. Itachi was putting his shoes on at the door when he turned at the sound of his mother behind him. "Are you going to see Shisui?" she asked. "Hi, Okazen. I'll be quick about it." "Okay." Uchiha Makoto watched her son mutely. Itachi has always been a solemn child, lonely and isolated from the others. She had been against his early graduation from the academy, arguing with the rest of the Uchiha council that Itachi was just a boy, he needed to interact with other children his age. Ever since he joined the Anbu, he no longer sat at the dinner table with them and the affectionate hugs between them had grown rare. If Itachi had been spending the time with his Anbu partner instead, Uchiha Makoto wouldn't have minded. The different personality that Brazen Girl exhibited would do her son much more good than the wary, complacent dispositions of the clan and village elders. But since Itachi was duty-bound to attend the tense conferences, Makoto's heart had grown heavy with the knowledge that her precious son was drifting further and further away from the family and from her. The only times she'd see that guarded expression fade was when he was around Sasuke. "Nay, Itachi-kun," Makoto said, watching the adolescent dolefully as she leaned on the doorframe. "You're doing all right with the Anbu position, aren't you? Hi, Okazen. You don't mind having to attend all those meetings every day?" "No, Okazen." Makoto sighed silently. "You know you don't have to go if you don't want to, right?" "I don't mind, Okazen." Itachi, where had he gone, the little boy who'd stand beside her diligently as she cooked in the kitchen or insist to carry the laundry basket for her? The very same boy, her eldest, had been forced to grow up so quickly that if not for the care and respect he never failed in giving to her, she would have pronounced her little Itachi gone. It took all of Makoto's self-restraint to keep from swooping in and gathering the child up in her arms. Her conversation with her youngest son earlier had only validated her fears. "Mama," Sasuke had asked her that evening during dinner, which Itachi and his father had been absent from. "Why doesn't Itachi have friends?" Makoto had stopped, surprised that her youngets had caught on with the fears that had been accumulating for some time. "What do you mean, Sasuke? Of course your brother has friends." Sasuke shook his head. "Everyone is mean to him," he explained. "Nobody wants to talk to him when we go out except for me." Of course, children Itachi's age were afraid of him and the adults he surpassed grew to hate him. Makoto had gently brushed a strand of hair from her youngest child's face before promising him that she would talk about it with Itachi. Now, instead of thoughtful and quiet, the object of Sasuke's concern only looked sad and tired. Makoto ached inside because she understood why, and gave Itachi a smile that hopefully hid the liquid in her eyes. "You'll tell me if you're feeling bad about anything, right, Itachi? Promise me." After a pause, Itachi's shoulders relaxed as he nodded. Hesitant at first, Makoto gently pressed her firstborn towards her for a hug and said the magic words, hoping despite herself that her matured son was still able to believe in them. "Aishiteru Itachi, you know that, right?" From the depths of his mother's inky tresses, Itachi's felt his heart ache as well. The safety of those familiar arms around him was enough to balm the anxious burden of distrust and secrecy he had long been toiling under. He had forgotten the last time he'd felt safe enough to drop the defenses he had built around himself. "I do, Okazen," he replied, his strained voice exposing more of his longing than anything else. At least his mother would always understand. At least she wouldn't leave him, of her own accord. At the very least, she would be as constant as the sun, so long as he didn't pull away. His eyes were smarting at the thought and what it had hinted. He clung tighter to the safety of the embrace and swallowed the lump in his throat. "I do, Okazen," Itachi repeated. "I love you too. Duty to the clan, first and foremost. As a Konoha shinobi you possess the will of fire." The floor beneath him began swimming, colors clashed in a fuzzy blur. He blinked, his eyes fixed respectfully on the floor in front of the village elders. As he listened, his jaw clenched, and hands unconsciously curled into fists at the summons. "We have no choice but to act now then. Time has run out. Then we have no choice. One life or the rest of Konoha." All of the assembled rested aged eyes on the ninja in their midst, the one who had already grown up too fast and will grow up even more after this. "Uchiha Itachi," Danzo asked after a heavy pause. "Would you give yourself up for the sake of the village? Annihilate your clan, if need be. Do it for the clan. You exist to protect the village of Konoha? Can you do it, Itachi? Or will you sacrifice the rest of the village?" He didn't know. His mind in turmoil, Itachi didn't want to have to choose between the lesser of two evils. Again, just as he had felt when father had told him the plans of the clan, he felt trapped. Suffocated, surrounded, quiet. Sadly, the Hokage asked the boy. Just a boy, but the ways of the world never see that. Kneeling in front of them. Can you make the decision, Itachi? And with his heart in his throat, the scarlet-eyed youth nodded. Perhaps it was a good thing Raiga, that egotistical, self-centered jerk, had confronted her again today. Anbu Wolf had then been ordered by her commander to apologize to the Hokage for her unruly actions and pitiful lack of self-control towards her colleague. If she hadn't, she'd never have heard what she had just heard. Silently, stealthily, Haruna watched as Itachi stood up and walked away, his pale face betraying the disquiet within. She followed. The bustling town of Konoha is a new and unfamiliar place. Haruna looks up at the tall buildings, squaring her shoulders as she wonders how she could fit in. Orphaned, with only the wolves that trot by her side for company, the rest of the townsfolk brush past the brunette child like water around a stone. She is ushered into the academy, told to join a class of other children who stare shyly at her, and Haruna tries her best. But it's hard and the work is so different. She knows the senseis try to be kind, but even the simplest genjutsu seems a bit beyond her. No wolves are allowed inside the school, so after a while Haruna turns to playing games during lessons. She knows her parents and her siblings would be ashamed of her but can't quite bring herself to care. Has the Hokage talked to you yet? One of the orphanage kids she shares the building with asks her while they wait in line for dinner. The Hokage? She asks. The Hokage is the most important shinobi in the village. It is strange to think of someone so great talking to abandoned children like them. Her companion nods. Do you want to be a ninja? 'Cause the lady told me that they sometimes let the orphanage kids become ninjas. They do? Yeah. Do you remember Usagi? He left and is in the Anbu now. Anbu? Haruna repeats, cocking her head curiously. She shrugs. If anything, she'd rather play with her wolves. Iti. One day, as the girl sits on a hill outside town, Haruna is surprised to see the Hokage himself walking up the grassy slope. She scrambles up as the old man makes his way towards her, defenses up. When the man just looks at her for a long moment before sitting down beside her, she takes the chance to make her escape. The ridden seals snake their way across the grass before a puff of smoke brings a wolf at her side. Haruna, the man's voice was very quiet. I just want to talk. Can you let the really nice wolf you brought go home now? Of everything the girl had thought the old man might say and the fact that the man knew her name in the first place, it was so unexpected she only turned stunned eyes in reply, mouth agape. The old man regarded the small face for a moment before speaking again, patiently. You're able to summon things already, Haruna? They're just wolves. Hokage-sama, she remembers to add quickly. Although I'm not supposed to bring them here anymore. Sensei said so. Well, here is and leans back and raises his eyes to the skies. The Kichiyose is actually a high-ranked jutsu to use, did you know that? There is no reply. She had never known that because it always seemed so easy, and the Sandaime continues. How would you like to be in the Anbu, Haruna-chan? Anbu? She knows who they are now, and the fact that they are the elite of the elite. But Hokage-sama, I'm only genin. I know someone who could use a good companion, you see. He watches as the girl's dark head nods up and down to show she is listening. Maybe your personality would do him good. You're used to taking care of other people, aren't you? Haruna wants to say otherwise, but the Hokage is smiling kindly at her and looks so inviting that she shuts her mouth before the words come out. Beside her, the wolf she summoned is looking at her with bright, beady eyes, and she knows it is listening too. You'll learn plenty of things in the Anbu, child. What do you say? Haruna decides to give it a shot. If the Hokage thinks she's good enough to get in, then she won't disappoint him. 2 days after, she makes her way to the Anbu HQ, telling herself not to be daunted by the tall, awe-inspiring members around her. Standing alone at the entrance, one hand clutching a paper bag, brown knapsack on his back and a familiar red and white fan on the back of his shirt, is the boy she is to be partnered with. He has tiered troughs forming under his eyes, but he is polite and addresses her with respect. Hajime, I'm Itachi, the boy says to her, extending a hand in greeting. He is younger, smaller, but his eyes tell differently. He is hardly what she expected him to be. The boy had to be some 3 years younger than her unless she missed her guess. Had the Hokage wanted her to befriend this quiet kid? Nevertheless, she smiles and returns the gesture. Itachi felt the ache in his head intensify 100-fold as he stopped in his tracks. "I can see you, Haruna," he said shortly into the undergrowth beside him. "Thanks, I did that on purpose," Haruna lied, stepping out from behind the stone wall she had been crouching under. Her initial plan had been to confront him as soon as he'd gone out, but instead of taking the normal route home, towards the Uchiha compound west of the Hokage Tower, Itachi had gone south, heading for the closure of the forest. "So this is the reason I've been doing solos for the past 6 months," she remarked, feigning reluctant involvement. "I think I deserve an explanation." Itachi's voice was harder than he intended. "This is not your concern." "Of course it isn't. Just like how it isn't my concern to know why you've just been asked if you were capable of annihilating your clan, right?" "Haruna, please. I'm just curious," she said innocently, playing it delicately because Itachi almost never opened up when he wasn't meant to. "My baby teammate here's roaming the forest at night, but that's not any reason to worry, of course. I already told you that you didn't have to know," Itachi replied quickly, moving forward and further into the forest. His mind was still reeling, he felt sick, he wanted so badly to release the burning at the backs of his eyes and just to sit in silence. Long, golden silence that stretched longer and longer, that he could find solace in. "Don't lie to me, Itachi," Haruna said, and there was something in her tone that stopped him, told him not to leave, warned him that things would worsen unless he told her what it was he was trying to hide. "You've never lied to me before, so don't try it now." Itachi had kept himself distant on purpose, because while he knew he was eventually going to have to eliminate one or the other, and he was honorable enough not to pretend. He was an honest person, but withholding information wasn't the same as lying, and Itachi wasn't going to lie to them or himself by masquerading as a loyal shinobi or a dutiful clan member. Or a good teammate either. "Haruna-san, they will not hesitate to kill you if you know this." "They?" His tag team partner's eyes narrowed. She would jump into this mess out of her own accord and threats meant nothing. "You mean your clan and village elders?" Itachi looked away. "So both of them have something to hide then," she concluded. "Thanks for letting me know." Somewhere in the distance there was a howl. Wolves venturing out as the moon waxed further with every passing night. There were dark circles under Itachi's eyes, and Haruna couldn't help but notice the small scratches on his arms, and she was reminded just how young, fragile, he was. Hell, she was young too, and the world, which always seemed so conquerable when you knew what it felt like to hold a person's life in your hands, now seemed altogether far too big. Far too big for a 13-year-old having to consider genocide and his 17-year-old teammate trying to find a way to help. "Oi, Itachi, talk." Itachi's eyes flicked upwards, his mouth a tight line. "We are Anbu, Haruna. You cannot be expecting me to tell you." "Yes I am, damn it." Itachi looked slightly surprised at her language but said nothing. "I'm trying to help. I'm your partner, in case you had forgotten. It is because of that I was hoping you would not attempt to ask." "Right. Cause you're lying so much to everyone else, is that it?" She saw him flinch at her bluntness and almost felt guilty. Everyone else always spoke harshly to her young teammate, not her. After an awkward pause, Haruna continued, changing her tone, "If you're doing this for my protection, you know that doesn't work. You already know you can trust me." Owlishly, Fugaku's son stared at his teammate for a long moment. Trust? He had both everyone's and nobody's trust, and that hadn't changed anything. He still had to shoulder the elder's manifold sins. Quietly, simply, Itachi answered her slowly. "In a coup d'état, you can't trust anyone, can you?" Haruna's eyes widened, she understood it immediately. Itachi didn't say anything else. Opposite him, he could see his teammate's shoulders rise and fall as she told herself to breathe, to stay calm and stop the memories that the mention of war brought along with it. A rebellion, a military uprising against the government, movements that had brought the downfall of so many countries in the past. To think that there would be one here, in Konoha? "So what are you going to do then? Stop it yourself?" She fixed a steady gaze on her partner's Sharingan eyes. "Don't think I don't know what that means, Itachi." Itachi's hands fell to his side like a leaf on the forest floor. "Can you think of anything else?" Haruna frowned. "If most of this depends on your involvement, then why don't you just leave the village for a while?" she suggested at length, speaking as she turned the possibilities and alternatives in her mind furiously. "Until it dies down, both sides seem to need you, right? If you aren't there, then they can't go ahead with their plans." Are you suggesting I run away? And his impeccable composure did not hide the incredulity in his voice. If that means that no blood will be shed, then yes. She saw Itachi's shoulders sag and wished she had other ideas, but her mind was blank and everything had gone black or white again. No one would be able to do anything if you weren't there, right? Itachi sighed and shook his head. My family will suffer if I were to leave. They will do everything they can to get information out of them. He told her with no small amount of regret and utter helplessness lacing the tone. This has been building up since before I was born, Haruna-san. They won't stop because of my absence. Itachi was looking at him, dark eyes probing silently. There was a silence that followed his words, and before Haruna could think up a reply to them, Itachi continued. I had a suspicion that things were to turn out this way. Yet there are only those two options, my clan or the village. There is no other choice for me. So what are you going to do then? She repeated the question. Time was running out as they spoke and decisions had to be made. I don't know, he said finally. I just don't know. I need to think this through. Itachi, you aren't going to eliminate your clan, are you? The Uchiha's pallid face went from pain to threatening tearfall and then nothing. All emotion seeped out like frost under a warm hand. If I have to, he said slowly, I will. Haruna paled momentarily, but she was shinobi, Anbu, and the moment passed. Between them the forest sighed and a breath of melancholy made its presence felt. First impressions are simple. Itachi is quiet, hard-working and slightly unsociable. Haruna on the other hand is loud, persistent and immediately takes the boy under her wing despite the fact that he already carries himself with the sure gravity of an adult and his skill rivals that of the Anbu nin already training them. Anbu is the Shinobi Academy intensified 100,000-fold, and by the end of every day, Haruna is a walking mass of chakra exhaustion and aching muscles which she does her utmost to deny. The Hokage had asked her himself to watch over this Uchiha Itachi, and since he could be a lot worse as a charge, she does her best to make sure he at least has someone to talk to. Being a genius must be hard. You need to stop being so awkward, she tells him, when they are left alone once again to practice what they have learned. He's too easily swallowed up by the crowd, and while he has come to stick close to her whenever anything involved polite society, she can't always be there talking for the both of them. Say hi to people. Smile. Itachi does as she suggests, but Haruna only rolls her eyes because saying hi to her wolves wasn't the same thing. Itachi obeys her. Haruna means well and is genuinely concerned for him most of the time, sometimes to the point of getting in trouble, being late to finish and such on his behalf. She is welcoming, and to a prodigy like himself, who the rest of the world shifts awkwardly around, it means a lot. She calls him her baby teammate, while Itachi calls her his friend. Because friends, after all, are rare in the world of the shinobi. The Hokage was right to put the two of them together. Within the next few months they finally become members of the Anbu themselves, with tattoos etched on their shoulders and masks issued. Haruna's is a wolf, of course. Itachi dons a standard red one. You will be our youngest tag team on the front lines, their commanding superior tells them. I trust that you will not disappoint. They make a name for themselves as a team, with Haruna leading and Itachi behind her. It is like clockwork, and unlike the rest of the Anbu, their cohesion is not forged out of necessity. The gates of the Land of Iron are closed and will remain shut until tomorrow morning. After delivering the message to the daimyo, Itachi walks up to the bridge where Haruna is waiting with their gear, and says, we have to spend the night here. It was in the late afternoon, the sun wasn't to set for ages. Haruna heaves a deep sigh, but there's nothing to do here though. We'll die of boredom before tomorrow. They are both tired after the long journey, and Haruna is only too happy to do as Itachi suggests and remains seated at the bridge while Itachi scouts the place. The daimyo's town is a quiet, rustic place with equally quiet and rustic people. He comes up to her some minutes later and says the only thing vaguely interesting he saw was an opening for a photography store. Photography store? Haruna scratches her head with a disappointed chuckle. Really? We have an afternoon with nothing to do though. Itachi remarks offhandedly. I suppose we must just make do with what we have. Indeed, mother, she replies with much exaggerated eye-rolling. Itachi, who has seen it all before, doesn't comment. Biting back a laugh at the idea, she informs her young teammate that the last time she took a photo was when I was 5. Besides, since when did Anbu ever take photos? We get masks for a reason, you know. Then she sees Itachi's face and with a good-natured snort says she wouldn't mind if Itachi wanted to. I think it would be useful to have a record of our team. We needn't show it to everyone. He reasons. Well, Haruna shrugs. Why not? It's dark inside, and Haruna giggles at the funny man, with fish eyes, who holds the camera like it's some prized treasure. After some deliberation as to where to stand, they stand together, facing the lens. The camera flashes. Itachi pays for it, sliding the coins across the counter while Haruna picks up the photo and laughs. You look like you're my little brother. A very, very serious one, she comments, because while she is grinning Itachi looks solemn beside her. I wonder what your family photos are like. On the way back to the village, Haruna's young teammate tells her about when they took a family photo when Sasuke was 3. It had taken 3 tries because Sasuke had sneezed on the first one and his father had wanted to change his outfit. Haruna laughs along with him and says it was a good thing that they had a family portrait. Do you still have your one? Itachi asks. Haruna shakes her head. After a pause, Itachi slips the photo into her hands. If I show it to the others, they may become envious of me, he only says gravely, by way of explanation. I'll take good care of it, she assures him. It would make the dorm cell she stayed in a tad homier with it pinned on her wall. Anxiety hung like a dark, impenetrable cloud. The silence was vacuum when Itachi told her his decision. The rebellion will not happen, he said after it, as if to console himself. His eyes were deep dark wells of sorrow. Loyalty to village transcends all, he said in monotone, repeating the familiar words ingrained into every person with a Hite 8. Haruna felt her hands clench and unclench as she fought to stay level. You're not serious, are you? This is a matter I would not joke with. Yeah? She said loudly. I kinda wish you were. My apologies, Itachi said. His hand was shaking. Slowly Itachi closed his eyes. There was a wave of feeling welling up inside but for once he didn't have the words to let them out. His heart was clenching as his decision burned in the back of his mind. He looked out into the fading dark, ready to let the matter drop when Haruna spoke. Then, the words seemed dark and heavy in her mouth. What if I did it? The younger boy had turned away from his teammate once the words were out of his mouth, but his head snapped back up immediately now. I'm sorry? I said. Haruna spoke slowly, deliberately, knowing full well the magnitude of her words. What if I did it? Instead of you, I could probably do it. Haruna knew Itachi was no child and had killed more men than Junin twice his age. But even so, something inside that years exposed to the darkest side of the shinobi world had been unable to rid just didn't want to have to see her teammate go through this. You don't need to kill them. Please do not. Itachi's answer was short, simple, final. There is no need for you to be involved in this. You're far too young to be thinking of genocide, Itachi-kun. While there was no doubt that Haruna was capable, Itachi knew she harbored a fear, an innate hesitance to sever a life with her own hands. It hurt him to know that things were dark enough to have his bright-eyed teammate offer to kill someone on her own. They're all going to die either way, whether by my hand or not. There is no other alternative. Please, do not stain your hands for my sake. And what happens next? When you've killed your family and are the last one standing? She watched as Itachi's hand shook. His eyes were dead, as was the voice in his throat. I will just have to live with it. I have no choice in the matter. The sun rose and the village was waking. From where they stood, she could hear the quiet morning sounds as the civilians shuffled back to life, blinking sleepily as laundry strung on high taut lines flapped with the breeze. This was peace, or at least what all shinobi put their lives on the line to fight for. Not a choice between genocide or the Fourth Ninja War. Eyes shadowed, Haruna asked one last question. When? For a second, his teammate's hazel eyes on his blurred dangerously and Itachi remembered just how tired he was of everything. He hadn't slept for the last week. The day after tomorrow, he said, his voice low and in Haruna's ears, so unbearably sad, when the moon is full. There was a silence. Man, Haruna said hollowly, this place is messed up. Itachi shrugged by way of answer, unwilling to say anything more. Don't worry little guy, she assured him when the youth turned to her quickly a while after, to remind her that this was meant to be classified information, your secret's safe with me. She paused, reaching a hand out hesitantly before resting it on his shoulder. Thin but supple, they did not deserve to carry the deaths of his entire clan. I have a responsibility over you. You're not doing this alone. She felt Itachi tremble, but his hand found hers on his shoulder and stayed there. Haruna wanted to punch something, to drain her chakra, summoning her wolves and set them on whoever was to blame for letting the world turn out as messed up as it was now. Naruto, he knew what it was like to be hated, to be isolated from the rest of the world, and she had seen its effects firsthand. That Itachi would accept this and even push everyone else away. They walked away in silence. Above, a crow flew, its feather floating silently down. Foolish little brother. If you wish to kill me, hate me, detest me, and survive in an unsightly way, foster your hatred, run away, and cling to a life without honor. And one day, when you have the same eyes I do, come before me. He headed for the Hokage's tower and found the Sandame standing watch over the village. Is it done? The man asked as Itachi knelt and fixed his eyes on the floor. Itachi steeled himself before he spoke. No, Hokage-sama. The Sandame remained still. There are survivors? Yes, he whispered. My little brother, Sasuke. Forgive me, he added, knowing that this was not planned and he did not yet know if this was able to be pardoned. The Hokage placed a hand on his shoulder, bade him rise. There was fear, regret and pain etched across a face far too young for it. What we have asked you to do, Itachi, is far worse than failing to complete this mission. The grandfatherly figure told him, hoping in some way to convey the gratitude he owed the boy for his sacrifice. Sasuke will remain under my protection from this moment on. Thank you, Hokage-sama. There was blood still drying on his hands. The south gate will remain unguarded for another 10 minutes. Hiruzen informed him. Itachi's mission was not finished yet and he rose, numbly. I can only hope that the future still holds brightness for you, my child. Itachi disappeared as silently as he had come, leaving just the slightest trace of copper scent lingering in the room behind him. It was a rule among shinobi to always have a backup plan. And with a mission of this magnitude, Itachi's rank and reputation as a shinobi did not undo the need to have contingency plans should he fail. Danzo let out a near imperceptible hiss from where he stood under the eaves of the tower. The moment Itachi chose not to kill his little brother, he had failed the mission. There was no choice but to wrap this up before the sun rose that morning. Pursue Uchiha Itachi, he told the masked men waiting his command. And eliminate him at all costs. He had done it. He had thrown away his humanity, committed the unforgivable crime of slaughtering one's own brethren. He had cursed himself to a life bound in guilt. Itachi was running, sprinting, stumbling, but never stopping. He had to run. Run from the broken bodies of his victims, the corpses of his parents, the tears on his brother's face. Mom, Dad, Sasuke, everyone, forgive me. The bitter bile in his throat, the unshed tears, the loud, raw pain pent up inside that Itachi fought to contain had reached their limit. He stopped running just enough to fall on his hands and knees and throw up the contents of his churning stomach on the ground. His throat burned, his head throbbed, and his lungs ached. Fresh tears formed rivulets down his cheeks as he rammed his fist inside his mouth, trying and failing to stifle his sobs. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. A kunai whistled through the air. He turned his head just in time to have it hit the tree beside him with a loud thunk. Itachi whipped his reed round, heart rate intensifying in an instant. Moonlight streamed down the valley and in the ethereal glow the shadows in the trees seemed more pronounced. He saw a flash of metal and realized that his battle were not over. Years of training had honed instincts. He didn't want to have to fight after the nightmare he'd been through, but if he just murdered his own kin, he could do a lot more and a lot worse on any who intended to follow him. The nin said nothing. Silence was the language of every Anbu shinobi. His Sharingan had enough chakra to pinpoint the faintly masked signatures and count 2, 4, 6 of them. It took only a second to realize their presence, and that was all the time he had before they came in. It was fight or flight. Itachi chose the latter. There was nothing else for it. He ran, and like persistent silhouettes the shinobi followed. Around Konoha the forest stretched a few miles in each direction before fanning out into plain terrain and the mountain ranges. Navigation was harder under cover of darkness, but having trained there often enough, Itachi pushed through the trees with ease and without a trail. His sword was strapped on his back and ready to be unsheathed while he continued forward, leaping swiftly over the dips in the damp earth, and pushing the memory of his dead parents away. The Anbu nin tailing him did not panic. All too aware of just who their target was, the task was not meant to be simple. He will tire soon. Their leader signaled to his team in the trees beside him. Only close the distance gradually. Hi, a flip, a bound over an upturned log. Itachi latched wires without looking and could hear the trickle of a stream close by. Behind him his pursuers were gaining, and little by little his body shifted into stance for inevitable combat. Not far behind the chasers and their target, a wolf-masked, unauthorized agent moved swiftly. Haruna had shadowed the group ever since Danzo had sent them after Itachi. She targeted the head of their pack before pivoting and ran towards him. "Wolf here, sir." The masks all turned to her, glinting eerily in the dark. "You weren't called," the captain, or at least the one leading them forward and who she recognized as one of Danzo's handmen, told her gruffly. "If you would allow me, Haichu," Haruna said as she ducked a low tree branch, "this is my teammate. Allow me to take responsibility for him." "You, Wolf?" "Yes, sir." She said it so earnestly she almost believed herself too. In front of them, the gray glow of Itachi's metal armor flickered. "Danzo-sama told me everything. I will do what my duty tells me to." "Very well. You know how the Uchiha works, yes?" "Yes, sir. Please allow me to assist you in the least." A curt nod, then Haruna joined them, fitting seamlessly into their formation, and calculated her next move. Briefly Itachi pondered on conserving the chakra he had left for his Sharingan, but the odds were stacked against him at this point. The first waves of fatigue were hitting him hard, and he still needed enough energy to make it to the border. He cocked his head sideways to scan the group tailing him. They couldn't chase him forever, he would have to deal with them at some point. The one furthermost to the right moved first. He dipped and weaved right as he was about to reach the youth who was their objective and slashed downwards with the curved blade of his katana. Itachi parried with one of his gauntlets and the blade clashed against the metal strapped to his arms with a shriek that sent sparks flying into the air. The swordsman was quick and he followed through with an uppercut slash straight away. Itachi sidestepped to the right, but even so, the blade grazed his arm, cutting a crimson line. Quickly, before the man could respond with a follow-up, he brought his fist upwards in the solar plexus, knocking the wind out of the swordsman, and stunning him for a brief moment. Despite his counter-offensive, the fight had taken Itachi close to having his back to another tree, leaving him dangerously open for more attacks, and the nin were not done yet. An explosive tag was latched on a kunai and thrown. Itachi turned, caught it in midair and threw it back. It exploded in fiery shards, setting a tree ablaze where the agent had been a millisecond ago. At the same time, two more shinobi engaged, one a plain white mask while the other resembled a tanuki. And calling back to mind the cat is practically ingrained into his muscles over the years, Itachi counteracted without delay. The boy kneed the back of the first one's knees, knocking him forward and out of range for the time being and, using the momentum gained from the move, he lashed an arm out against his adversary's neck, pulling him back and leaving him open to launch an elbow to his gut. Though his opponent wore a breastplate, Itachi knew all too well that, with the correct amount of force, a considerable amount of internal damage could be made. Yet the attack left Itachi open for a fraction of a second, which was enough time for the others to counter. Haruna threw herself forward just as the tanuki mask hit the ground, and gave a forceful palm to the chest, the heel of her hand landing on the space above Itachi's heart. Her raven-haired teammate barely had time to breathe, let alone dodge. But it was a testament to his experiences in battle that Itachi kept the presence of mind to roll backward with the hit, his back hitting the tree with a thud. Haruna bent her arm, the bone of her forearm adding slight pressure to the windpipe. Katana drawn, her blade angled downward. Behind her, the other shinobi advanced. Haruna leaned closer. "Oi, Itachi." She saw his eyes widen in recognition before his hand closed around the smoke pellets dangling from her waistband and threw them. Thick clouds of smoke filled the clearing. When it dissipated enough, the rest of the group saw two figures, one standing while the other fell to their knees. Itachi sprung away in the opposite direction, this time picking up speed and urgency, but their attention was drawn to Wolf. The white bandages wrapped around her right leg were rapidly turning vermilion and she staggered, resting her weight on one side. "Wolf, I'll follow," she told them, gritting her teeth. "I'm not done yet." The kunoichi ran her thumb over the blood on her thigh and whispered a Kachiyose no jutsu. Two wolves emerged from the resulting smoke, whom she beckoned to follow their fleeing target. The other shinobi nodded, obviously grateful for the tracking assistance the animal summons would no doubt provide. "You know where to find us," the captain told her while the young woman began to bandage the fountain of hot crimson now pooling underneath her. They were wasting time as they spoke and the man knew it. Wolf nodded and they went on without her. Haruna touched the clotting cut gingerly as she watched them. Before puffing into a cloud of smoke, a few meters away at the bottom of another clump of trees, Haruna heaved a sigh of relief next to Itachi. Well, that was close. Underneath the hand she had clamped over his mouth, Itachi's muscles were tense. Itachi tapped at her hand weakly. "Oh, my bad," she retracted her hand quickly. "Haruna-san, I don't understand." Haruna placed both hands up innocently. "I had to play along. Danzo wants you dead since you didn't kill Sasuke." She saw Itachi take a sharp breath. "I'm glad you didn't," she said after a while. Itachi looked up at her, his red eyes bright. "I must leave before they realize I am a clone of yours." Whatever the kunoichi wanted to say she forced down in the recesses of her throat. As the leader of their tag team and as the only person the boy had left to look up to, Haruna knew that she had to remain mature and collected. "I know." Itachi closed his eyes wearily for a moment and when he opened them again he saw that 3 more summons had appeared. 2 russet, another one the color of pearl, had appeared beside the older kunoichi. "Wa?" he asked uncertainly, still feeling slightly dizzy. The colors clashed together for a fearful moment and he put a hand to his eye. "They know the safe way to the border," Haruna explained. The amount of chakra she had used to summon the other 2 wolves and the shadow clones beforehand was beginning to take its toll and a bead of sweat trickled slowly down the side of her face. "All you have to do is follow them." The boy opened his mouth to speak but was cut short when she held her hand up. "I'll keep the other ones off your trail as long as I can. And your secret, of course, stays with me." "And Sasuke?" he asked anxiously, the last but the greatest of his worries. "Will Danzo?" "He won't," Haruna promised him vehemently. "I'll watch. I'll take care of him and Naruto together." Itachi's eyes watered for a moment and he swallowed back a sob of relief and gratitude. He whispered hoarsely, "Why are you doing this?" Haruna's eyes softened and when she spoke she seemed older than she felt. "You're so young, Itachi. I can't say how much I wish things didn't have to turn out this way but they have, and we can't do anything about it. But I won't let you do this on your own." Haruna smiled wistfully, before she leaned in and pressed warm lips against a pale forehead. Both of them could tell the other had more to say, but this wasn't the time. There was never going to be another time. Hazel eyes closed and pulled away first. "Hurry, Itachi," she told him. "You need to clear some distance." That's all for now. If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments.